Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to Bellemont Zoo. Today we're going to be building 2 habitats in our new South American house for the sloth and for an animal we've never used before, the spectacled bear. This is our Amazon adventure area from last week, and since then I've added in a load of mesh to keep these animals away from the animals we're putting in today. This raised area at the back of the South America house is where we're going to be building the habitats, an Andean habitat for the spectacled bear, and then a habitat for the sloth to bridge us from the Amazon to the Andes. Now the sloth lives in the walkthrough exhibit, but there's no reason to actually have to use that as a walkthrough exhibit if you don't want to, and we're going to use it as a standard exhibit here. I originally planned to have jaguar here, but I didn't actually have as much space as I thought I did, so we need to use something that's going to take up a little less room. So I decided to swap it for another iconic South American animal, the sloth, and that's what we're going to put in here. So I've just sunk the exhibit down slightly so that the mud starts to meld into the terrain, and then we're going to use the terrain painting tool just to tie everything together and disguise the straight line of the path there. Last time we built for the sloth, we did use it as a walkthrough habitat, so I thought it'd be fun to use it the other way this time. So once we finished getting all the terrain done, making this start to look a bit more natural, we're going to completely fill it with foliage, and then we'll sort out the paths on the guest side of things. So this is just coming out of the Amazon experience that we built last week, and we'll add a few more paths in and then cover it all with sand so it's all tied together nicely. And then we'll use the walls that we've used throughout this area to make the guest side of things look a lot more attractive. We'll just drop them down, get rid of some of the plants, and that'll make a really nice little edge for the path so that the guests can see above it and into the habitat. And then we're going to start making the ditches, which is what's going to keep both the sloths and the bears into their habitats. So we're going to have a dry moat for the sloth, and then later on we'll have a water moat for the bears. So what we need is for one side of it to be a nice smooth slope so they don't fall in, and then the other side to be a flat sheer wall that they can't climb. That'll keep them nice and safe in the habitats. We just make one ditch, and then we'll align each piece of it to the rocks behind it, and then move it forward so that the smooth part is in front of the very climbable looking rocks, and then we can dig the terrain out, and that'll give us a ditch to keep them in. And then we'll use these same walls again on the other side to cover up the join between the terrain and the concrete and just make that look really attractive as well. When it's all done, what we'll end up with is, from the guest perspective, all you can see is nice looking rocks and plants, and then in the middle, hidden from the guests, is the concrete ditch that's going to stop the sloths from climbing out. Although I figure with a sloth, even if it tried to escape, by the time it had got anywhere, you'd probably notice and just pick it up and put it back in the habitat. Although apparently sloths can be pretty dangerous. Despite their slow speed, they've got some serious claws on them, and they can do quite a lot of damage if you were to annoy one. Seeing as Planet Zoo's keepers are quite happy wandering around habitats full of lions and tigers, then I don't think that's going to be a problem here. Let's carry on with the foliage. So we've got these nice little groups of foliage that we made for the Amazon exhibit, and they're still relevant here. We're going to use those, and some rhubarb, and then the giant Planet Zoo log as well, which is such a nice piece if you've got room for it. We want all the foliage in this habitat to tie in nicely with the Amazon adventure area at the start, because it's basically the same environment. We're just not doing it right next to the river here, so it's a bit more suitable for the sloths. They can swim, sloths, but it's not something they do a huge amount of, especially not in South America. We'll also scatter some of these pebbly kind of rocks around to join the path in the habitat onto the terrain, and just generally scatter them around and get the habitat looking really attractive. And then the final thing that we're going to do is create a big fake tree as a centerpiece for the habitat around this part of the climbing frame here. We'll start it off with some of the biggest strangler fig roots. These are one of my favorite pieces. They're so good for anything vaguely tropical. They always liven up any build. So we'll wrap these around the poles, and then we'll get the big fake tree in the center of it. And once we've recolored this, that's going to sit in nicely with the roots and just provide a nice centerpiece for the habitat, which the sloths will still be able to climb around. We'll add some misters in as well. They're vital to the look of this habitat. And then we can move on to the spectacled bear. I'm really looking forward to this. We've never built for the spectacled bear before, and I saw them quite recently in Chester Zoo. They are really cool animals, quite unique looking among the bears. And in Planet Zoo, they've all got individual facial markings as well, which is really cool. And this habitat is where the Andes part of the building is going to come in. I saw a really cool reference photo of a spectacled bear in the wild. They live in quite a few different environments across South America. The major one is cloud forests up in the Andes, which are really beautiful, sort of almost like a temperate rainforest, but still a little bit tropical. But then with the height that they're at, they're a lot cooler, and spectacled bears are happy in temperatures ranging anywhere from 13 degrees below freezing up to 42 degrees above freezing, according to the Zoopedia anyway, and I can well believe that with all the different environments that they live in. But we're going to get a slightly more mountainous environment in here. I saw an amazing reference photo of one of them in the wild on these gorgeous rocks that were covered in moss and all sorts of plants, and we're going to replicate that here. We're just going to get the viewing area for the guests in first. I thought we'd go with some logs for this. These log wall panels look really good as long as you can't see the edges of them where they're not as round as they should be. So we're going to use these, and then we'll use one of the Planet Zoo logs as a border, and this will hide the ends of them, which look a bit janky. We'll get them as close to the ground as possible. We don't want people tripping over them, just enough to cover up those logs. And then we're going to take the walls that we've used throughout this habitat and modify these to fit more of an Andes theme. So we're going to make them grey rather than brown, and we're going to replace the tropical plants with plants that more closely match the reference photo that I was looking at. And then we're also going to add a little glass fence to make sure that the guests don't end up in the moat. This one will be filled with water, and we'll get that in a bit. One of the things I wanted to achieve in this zoo is not to keep remaking the same things. So this glass fence we built for the penguins back in episode 1, and we purposely built it generic so that we can reuse it whenever a glass fence is appropriate. I think this might be the first time we've reused this particular one. And with the fence in and the walls looking good, we can do basically the same thing we did in the sloths and just line the whole area with those. And then we can get some glass barriers in so that we can put water down in that moat. And then it's on to the rocks, which is my favourite part of this habitat. I want these to look like nothing we've ever built before, so rather than using the mossy rocks, we're going to use the, I think these are the tiger rocks, if I recall correctly, and then cover them in the little moss pieces, and then add loads of plants to that as well. And we're going to get a really unique looking little bit of terrain, which we can then copy around and build a raised area, almost like the slopes of a mountain, which is going to make up the majority of this habitat. I spent a long time just building this one little piece here. I wanted it to look really good, so when it's finished we can use multiple copies of it to build a really dynamic looking landscape in here. I always like to give the bears in our zoos lots of space, so the part of the habitat that you see here where we're building is going to be the public facing part of the habitat. And then if you look at the glass behind where we're building, you can see a sort of black box back there. That is going to be the off-show area for the bear as well. So the actual habitat's going to be about 50% bigger than the portion that's viewable to the public, and that will ensure that the bears will have lots of space. There's going to be a lot of height variations and climbing and enrichment on this side of things, and then there'll be an implied area at the back where they will have more of that. That's also helpful because trying to get the habitat barriers in here was an absolute nightmare because we're really far off the ground. There's not a lot of room. We've got that glass roof there, the way that's been rotated into position. If you start deleting bits of it, it looks really bad, and we don't have the pieces to fill in gaps. So the off-show area for the bears is mainly going to be implied. It's basically going to be there to hide where the keeper comes into the habitat, because that was a real struggle. Speaking about the roof, I uploaded that to the workshop on Wednesday, so if you want to build your own tropical houses, or you've got anything in mind where this sort of curved glass roof would be useful, then you can go and grab that now. The whole building won't be going onto the workshop, I'm afraid, well, not until it goes up as part of the final zoo file when it's finished, because it contains 2 habitats, an exhibit, water, null barriers, all the things that make turning stuff into a blueprint in Planet Zoo a nightmare. At best, it's going to take an enormous amount of work for anyone who downloads it to get it working, and at worst, it just won't work at all, which is what normally happens. So it's just the roof on the workshop for the moment. That's pretty much all the terrain done. We'll just get some buffalo grass in, and then we can move on to the climbing and the enrichment. We're going to have 3 major elements of climbing for the bears in this habitat. Firstly, we've got the rocky outcrop that we just built. Then we're going to have this big fake tree. We'll surround it with ferns, really sit that into the rest of the habitat. It's got some branches coming off of it that they could climb. And then we're also going to have a more traditional kind of climbing frame for them as well, to make sure that there's lots of opportunities for them to climb and somewhere that they could rest. We're going to use a tyre for that. I saw this might have been in Zoo Frankfurt. I thought it'd be a cool thing to build here, seeing as we've got this big tractor tyre in the game now. So we'll put that into the climbing frame, and then we'll use some of the chain pieces to attach that to one of the climbing logs, add a few details in. I really like this when it's done. It's a really kind of zoo-y looking climbing apparatus. That's the bears done. It's time for the building. As you can see right now, the building is basically just a roof and an interior. So we need to get all the external walls in, start making the outside of the building look really nice, get an entranceway for the guests and all sorts of stuff to turn this into a finished habitat. So we're going to start just by laying out the walls. Just going to use plaster panels for this. I just want to get the basic shape of the building. We don't want it just to be a solid rectangle. We want a more interesting shape for the building to go around that roof. We'll do it with the plaster pieces just because they are super simple to place down and will give us an idea of the shape. Then we can start covering them up where necessary. So the building is on 2 levels as well, remember, so we need 2 levels at the back and then 1 level at the front, and everything needs to be slightly wider than that roof so that the roof will sit on top of it rather than going all the way down to the ground as it does at the moment. We'll have some towers at the front of the building just because I thought that would look interesting, and then all the parts that can't be seen by the guests will be super utilitarian, nice and simple, no money spent where it doesn't need to be. We also need to get the roof to actually join on to the walls because it just ends at random points depending on where the pieces were rotated. So we're going to use some of the roof pieces upside down to give us a long straight section of white metal that exactly matches the roof, and you can see it in the background there. It really looks like the roof is a solid roof that connects onto the walls rather than just being a collection of pieces. We'll do some detailing as well, nothing too crazy because this is just going to be visible in the distance, but some air conditioning, doors to get people and animals in and out of the habitats, maybe a ladder so the staff can get up onto the roof, and then we can move on to making this look nice. You can tell how happy I am with the walls that we made for this habitat because I'm going to use them again for the outside of the habitat. This time we're going to remove some of the tropical foliage and put some slightly more temperate foliage on there, seeing as we're outside now, and then we'll start covering up the front of the building. This is inspired a little bit by a mixture of Gondwanaland at Zoo Leipzig, which is an amazing indoor rainforest, and Penguin Cove at Bird Paradise in Singapore. There's a nice archway at Gondwanaland, and the rockwork on the front of Penguin Cove is amazing, so I thought we'd just do a sort of Amazonian version of that. The whole front of the building is going to be covered in these rocks. One of the reasons I put the towers in is just to give us an excuse to get some higher rocks at either side. Makes it look more imposing and more interesting. We'll do a little bit of detailing, and that's the exterior pretty much done. Only the front of it will have the rocks on it because the rest of it isn't something that's going to be viewable to the guests in any major way, so no point in the zoo spending money on putting anything on there. We'll do a little bit of work on the entrance hall, so the guests will come through a main door, and then they'll go through a PVC door and then through the guest gate into the habitat so that the temperature control will work. Need a sort of airlock arrangement for those kind of habitats. And then we can move on to the final part of the build, the graphics and signage for the entrance. So normally I like to use big billboards for this, but I thought for a change we'd actually build it ourselves out of the decals and signage that the game provides us with. So once we've got this basic wall and some glass doors so that the guests can get into the entrance, we'll start making a mural out of signs and decals. To represent the Amazon to Andes theme, we're going to have a little Amazon themed display on the left hand side of the doors. We'll have a family of capybara here, and then we'll have a little family of spectacled bears on the other side. We'll decorate the right hand side to look like the Andes, so we've got a mountain decal there, and then we're going to use some of the moss decals to make grass for our bears to stand on. We'll do the same thing on the left hand side, but we use a different piece instead of the mountain. We'll put that in a second. We'll get some butterflies in, flying between them to connect the two together. A few other pieces, you'll see the finished result at the end of the video, and then we can move on to the sign. I'm going to use one of Wyatt Andrews Workshop's fonts for this. We'll put the name of the building up there, and as always we'll copy the pieces in front of each other to make them three-dimensional. We'll have the ones at the back black, and then the ones in front of them the colour that we actually want. I think a nice brown that ties in with the rocks, and white will be really striking. We'll use some of the new cable pieces from the Zookeeper's Animal Pack to hold them onto the wall. A capybara statue up on the top with a rock just to make sure it's sitting on it perfectly. And From Amazon to Andes is finished. Let's check it out. I'm pretty happy with that mural. We've got the sloth in there as well. And here is the spectacled bear and his tree feeder. They are so gorgeous. And the mossy, rocky outcrop that we made looks really good behind them. I'm really pleased with how the mesh looks in the background as well. I thought that was going to be a lot trickier to get in than it was. Here he is playing with his fire hose ball. Let's check out this whole area and head on over to the sloths as well. Here they are. They're so cute, the way they move so ridiculously slowly. Looks great with the two of them in here as well. And that is from Amazon to Andes. I wasn't planning a South American house in this zoo, but I'm really happy that I changed my mind, because I am very pleased with this finished build. Here's the whole zoo as it stood before we started this build, and here is what it looks like now. It is pretty big. That is a big chunk of the zoo filled up there. I think we'll be back in South America next week because I've got one more animal that I really want to add in that we have never built for before. Thanks for watching, thanks for joining the Explorers Club if you have, and I'll see you next week.